Dana White's passion for the UFC is well known. It's been a driving force behind the organization's success since 2001. His commitment to the UFC is evident in his hands-on approach to running the organization. He's also known for his tireless work ethic and his willingness to take risks. But there are a few fights he wishes never took place. These are UFC bouts that simply didn't come up to his standards. One was the 2010 fight between Anderson Silva and Demian Maia. Anderson Silva was the reigning UFC middleweight champion at the time. Demian Maia was a Brazilian jiu-jitsu specialist. He'd won 12 of his 14 professional fights by submission. The fight began with both fighters trading strikes in the center of the octagon. Silva landed a few early leg kicks and punches, but Maia quickly took the fight to the ground, where he attempted to control Silva and work for a submission. Silva, however, was able to defend himself against Maia's grappling attacks. He began to taunt and mock his opponent, much to the dismay of the crowd and the UFC officials.
Suicide bomb on one of those legs. He's staying steady.
He continued to land strikes on Maia, but refused to engage in any significant grappling exchanges. The fight quickly became one-sided. Silva began to dance around the octagon and showboat, while Maia struggled to mount any significant offense. The crowd became increasingly frustrated with Silva's behavior, and even the commentators expressed their disappointment with his lack of sportsmanship.
You know, Anderson Silva, everybody's angry at him. And it was a very disappointing fight.
Despite Silva's antics, the fight went the distance, with Silva winning by unanimous decision. Dana White was extremely critical on Anderson Silva's behavior in the fight. In a post-fight press conference, White expressed his disappointment with Silva's lack of sportsmanship, calling it disgusting and embarrassing. White went on to state that he had never been so embarrassed in the 10 years he had been involved with the UFC, and that he planned to have a serious conversation with Silva about his behavior.
And look at Anderson, when the fight was over, he couldn't even stand up to do his interview. He had to sit down to do his interview. And I made a big mistake. I shouldn't have let him fight this fight tonight.
He also apologized to the fans who had paid to watch the fight, saying that they deserved better than what they had witnessed in the octagon.
I don't think I've ever been more embarrassed in the 10 years of being in this business.
The UFC heavyweight fight between Curtis Blaydes and Alexander Volkov is another one White will want in his rearview mirror. Curtis Blaydes was widely regarded as one of the best wrestlers in the heavyweight division. He had a record of 13 wins, 2 losses, and 1 no contest. And he had won his last 4 fights in a row, including 3 by TKO or KO. Blaydes was known for his dominant ground and pound, and his ability to take opponents down and control them on the mat.
Oh, nice transition by Blaydes.
Alexander Volkov was a former Bellator heavyweight champion. He had a record of 31 wins and 7 losses. Volkov was known for his striking ability, particularly his devastating kicks and knees, and had won 20 of his fights by knockout or TKO. Initially, both fighters traded strikes in the center of the octagon. Blaydes attempted to take Volkov down early, but was unsuccessful in his first few attempts. Volkov began to find his rhythm in his striking, landing several hard shots on Blaydes. In the second round, Blaydes was finally able to take Volkov down to the mat, where he attempted to ground and pound his opponent. However, Volkov was able to defend against Blaydes' attacks and get back to his feet. As the fight continued, Volkov began to pick Blaydes apart with his striking. He landed several powerful kicks and knees to the body. In the fourth round, Volkov landed a devastating knee to Blaydes' head. It knocked him out cold and dramatically ended the fight. The knockout was one of the most brutal in UFC history and immediately went viral on social media. While Volkov celebrated his victory, Blaydes was stretchered out of the octagon and taken to the hospital for medical treatment. Dana White was in attendance for the fight. In a post-fight press conference, White praised both fighters for their performances, but expressed concern for Blaydes' health following the brutal knockout. White emphasized that the safety of the fighters was always the top priority for the UFC. But there was controversy in the air already. White acknowledged the issues surrounding the stoppage of the fight, with some fans and analysts questioning whether the referee should have allowed the bout to continue after Blaydes was knocked down. The UFC welterweight fight between Georges St. Pierre and Johnny Hendricks is also one White would soon forget. St. Pierre, a dominant champion with a record of 24 wins and 2 losses, had been the reigning welterweight title holder for several years and was widely regarded as one of the greatest fighters of all time.
It's about technique, setting trap, and intelligence. And I was trying to prove it tonight to all my fans.
Hendricks, meanwhile, was a ferocious striker with a record of 15 wins and 1 loss. He had won his last 6 fights in a row, including 3 by knockout. Hendricks came out strong. He landed several hard shots on St. Pierre in the first round. St. Pierre, however, was able to weather the storm and regain his composure. He used his superior wrestling skills to take Hendricks down and control him on the mat in the second and third rounds. As the fight wore on, Hendricks continued to land powerful strikes on St. Pierre. This included a devastating left hand in the 4th round that appeared to stun the champion. However, St. Pierre was able to survive the onslaught and take the fight to the ground once again. In the end, the fight went to the judges' scorecards.
28, 27, and still!
St. Pierre won a controversial split decision victory. Many questioned whether Hendricks had perhaps done enough to win, though. Dana White's reaction to the bout was one of surprise and disappointment. He was visibly frustrated by the controversial split decision that awarded St. Pierre the victory. In a post-fight press conference, White acknowledged that the scoring of the fight was a contentious issue. He promised to review the judges' decision-making process to prevent similar controversies from arising in the future.
I want to give my hands up to John Hendricks, my toughest opponent so far.
The UFC heavyweight fight between Francis Ngannou and Derek Lewis in 2018 also caused nightmares for Dana White. The fight began with both fighters throwing heavy shots. It was obvious from the start that Ngannou was the more skilled and powerful striker. He landed several brutal shots on Lewis in the first round and appeared to have him on the verge of a knockout several times. However, Lewis was able to make it to the second. In the second round, both fighters appeared to be more cautious. The action slowed down considerably. Ngannou continued to land the more significant strikes, but Lewis was able to avoid any major damage and make it to the third round. The third round was similarly uneventful. In the end, the fight went to the judges' scorecards. Ngannou won a unanimous decision victory. Dana White was livid about the lackluster performances of both fighters. In a post-fight press conference, White noted that it had not lived up to the hype.
Oh, I didn't hear it. I didn't hear one word of it.
He brought his wife back into things.
Yeah, I don't like that.
The welterweight fight between Tyrone Woodley and Demian Maia also pissed Dana White off. Both fighters were feeling each other out in the first round, but it quickly became apparent that Woodley was the more powerful striker. In the second round, Maia was able to close the distance and take Woodley down to the mat. Woodley defended admirably. The rest of the fight followed a similar pattern.
People thought that was a boring match, but for me, there was tremendous data in MMA.
With Woodley defending against Maia's takedowns and landing more strikes. In the end, the fight went to the judges' scorecards. Woodley won a unanimous decision victory. White, in a post-fight press conference, criticized Woodley for his lack of activity in the later rounds of the fight. He acerbically noted that Woodley had appeared to be more interested in defending against Maia's takedowns than by mounting any offense of his own. Much of what happens in the UFC happens because of Dana White. Love him or hate him, White has set certain standards for the league.
Hey, everybody, I'm here to save everybody, whatever. No, you're trying to become relevant again, is what you're trying to do.
And a lot of it has to do with keeping fans happy. So when a fight is boring, that crosses a solid line with White. And that's probably why the UFC provides such great entertainment. Catch you in the next video, folks.
Before, a few years ago, I was always trying to force things.
George Rush St. Pierre, the winningest fighter in UFC history.